My wife Nico grew up having a very strict father. Mabuting tao naman yung tatay niya. He was a very generous man, pero may pagka-stricto. He was very protective of his daughter. And I have to admit, I was a bit intimidated when I was still courting Nico. Nico grew up in a restricted environment from childhood until she was a young lady. She only gained her freedom, so to speak, when she got married to me. But you know what? I believe her parents weren't really that strict. May katwiran naman yung pagiging mahigpit nila eh. After all, Nico turned out okay. And I thank Nico's parents and even her father with his own style of strictness for the kind of woman she turned out to be. If you ask most fathers, they'd say they need to be strict with their children to make sure they grow up disciplined and avoid bad influences. So all their nagging, the restrictions they impose, the curfews they set, yung mga bawal at mga hindi pwede, which very often are non-negotiable, oh, they're meant for good. They are born out of a desire to see their kids grow up well. But there is a point when a father's strictness goes overboard and becomes stifling, suffocating, sometimes even abusive. If you ask a typical teenager, I doubt if anyone would say they're happy being with a very strict and extremely controlling father. Oh, I know of so many cases of kids who had been excessively dominated by their dads, and they end up rebelling against their fathers as soon as they reach their teenage years. This aversion to their dads extends well into their adult years, and some even lose all affection for their fathers as a result. There have been many studies that reveal how children of very strict fathers tend to not have self-discipline and a sense of responsibility as adults. Their lives had been too regulated, that they failed to learn how to manage their own lives. Many abused children become bullies as well. Whatever violence they received at home, they tend to pass on to others. And the tragedy is that when these kids become fathers and mothers themselves, they tend to be just as strict and cruel as their dads. It's like a curse that infects one generation and is passed on to the next. If fathers were more mindful of their impact on their children, if they keep themselves from acting like dominant lords over them, I believe children would grow up into better adults. The Bible gives us sound guidance on how fathers are to treat their children. In the book of Ephesians, the Apostle Paul once wrote this advice: "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Fathers are not overlords, but are meant to be stewards. Fathers are merely given by God the responsibility of raising their children so that they can grow up to be good and upright people who are productive and fruitful in their work. We have to keep in mind that fatherhood is a privilege given by God. Fathers will ultimately give an account for how they raise their children when the Lord Jesus returns. So if you're a father, of course you should discipline your children. That is expected of you. But you should also be mindful that you do not push your children to the limit of their anger, that they begin to resent how you treat them. Always remember that we are but stewards of God, called to care for and nurture our children to adulthood. If you have a father who's very strict, I urge you to be a bit more understanding. Don't lose your respect for your father. Take in the good that he gives you and reject the bad. And when the time comes that you become a parent yourself, strive to be a much better parent and ask for God's grace for this to be so. Keep in mind that in learning from your strict father and in learning to be a better parent yourself, faith matters too.